John Wayne, how are you?
I'm well, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. It's fun to be with you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are in week 2. Welcome, everybody. We're in week 2 of Jesus Together. We started this sermon series at the beginning of 2022. And so we can just jump right in. Week 2 of Jesus Together. John Wayne, can you get us caught up on what's happening so far?
Yeah, so if you saw the first, episode of this, we were kind of introducing the series, but week 1, we talked about what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and a lot of scholars talk about following Jesus or being a disciple of Jesus has gotten lost in translation. A lot of scholars would say the word for disciple or student, or the words that are used to denote those that are following after Jesus in the Bible, are more like what we would consider an apprentice. And so week 1, we kind of looked at the callings of the disciples and what it meant for them to follow them. And the force of what the disciples are called to do is to be an apprentice that spends every waking moment with their rabbi, with their teacher, becomes like them, and then does what they do. I mean, that's how an apprentice works, and this existed long before Jesus was calling disciples. There were rabbis before Jesus that did this. There's this existence in trade in the Greek culture. I mean, it was just around, and Jesus is modeling something that existed in the time. So, but how do you translate that to our time? Well, if we're followers or disciples in the same way that they were called, then that our goal should be, 1, to be with Jesus, 2, to become like Jesus, and then 3, to do what Jesus did in the world. So that was week 1.
Sweet.
We talked about ways of doing that, some of that spiritual discipline, some of the rollout. The focus of the series is small groups. So some of that's done in community, but that was whetting the appetite. Week 1, this is what it means to be an apprentice, a follower of Jesus. This last week we talked about, okay, but what does the Bible say about the community of apprentices? Like, what happens when there's a group of people that are called and gathered together in the name of Jesus? And so for that, we looked at Ephesians 4. Paul gives a pretty cool vision of what it looks like to be in community and what can happen in community.
That's awesome.
So there's the catch up.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you alluded to small groups, and we talked about that last time too.
Yeah.
And I know that's something we're planning to roll out here at Marvin. Can you go into more detail about that, and what kind of small groups do you see happening at Marvin?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been in the church for a long time, not just Marvin, but in the church, grew up in the church, right?
Yep.
And so you've seen a lot of different kind of small groups. They come in all different shapes and sizes. And some of them, like Marvin has an historic, Sunday school program.
Yeah.
For a century, decades and decades, Marvin's been known for Sunday school. And so Sunday schools typically have a Sunday school teacher, and then there's teaching that happens every week, and there is community and fellowship and things like that, but it's the same. For the history of Sunday school, even beyond Marvin, there's a teacher of Sunday school probably for the rest of their life.
Right.
And then you have another Sunday school teacher that comes in and they lecture and you learn stuff from them. You have all kinds of other small groups. You have these gatherings of people around affinities, affinity groups. I think we have ladies that get together and play dominoes or Mahjong or
Mahjong.
Is that Mahjong?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't even know what that game is, but I think I saw it happening the other day. And they get together, and that's community, it's fellowship, it's a small group. You have small groups. I shared Sunday. I have a friend that's involved with a theology on tap small group, gets together at a brewery. Same guys there, mostly same guys.
Right.
They get to know each other, but they talk about Jesus and things like that. I like the way that Kevin Watson, a Wesleyan author and scholar, talks about 3 different groups that you see in the church. One is informational. That's a Sunday school teacher model. Yeah. Tonight, Wednesday night, most of that is informational. When people get together on our campus in Bible studies, informational. Affinity groups, so it's around something that we share, some shared common thing. That's Mahjong or whatever that people do together. And then the last one is transformational small group. And that one's a critical one because, as Kevin Watson would argue, and I agree with, most of our church has those first 2. All informational, all affinity groups, and we don't have a lot of transformational group. The transformational group is a group that is focused on life change as like a central part of it. And so some of the small groups that we're working with are going to be based on the Wesleyan class meeting, which I'll get way into nerdy next week.
Yeah.
But that helps us to focus on not just learning about Jesus, but how are we living like Jesus? So
cool.
You could see those different versions of small groups in a church.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm sure you've experienced them too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think when I think about my time in church or in ministry, both at Marvin and even before working at Marvin, I think I participated in some affinity groups or Sunday school things in the past, but also some real significant growth in my life, I think, has taken place in what you would describe as transformation groups.
Yeah. And like, I just thought of it. We play basketball together.
Right.
That's like an affinity group.
Right.
Like those exist in different ways. And one of the things that is we got to be careful with, and I'm gonna have to be careful with over the next couple of weeks, because I'm gonna push hard transformational groups.
Yeah.
In a church that loves Sunday school.
Right.
They're gonna feel like this tension.
Yeah.
There's value in informational and affinity groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's the point that we're going to start making in the next couple of weeks is very few of us are in groups with people that actually know everything about us,
right,
and are helping us and holding us true to what it means to follow Jesus in a deep way. And that's where the focus of transformational group is going to go. So that's where
awesome.
we're headed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So when you preached on Sunday, you talked about Ephesians 4.
Yeah.
And you specifically touched on 3 realities that are part of a community of people following Jesus.
Yep.
Can you go into more detail and talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. So Ephesians 4 is one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible. I won't preach the sermon, so I hope people will go and check that out. But
check it out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or on podcast.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ephesians 4 was the basis of my dissertation, which is based on those transformational groups. And so I use it as a biblical foundation for what transformation groups can be. But Ephesians 4 is a kind of a bridge for Paul, where he's telling the church all of these things have happened that have changed your classification as a foreigner, and now you're part of the family. He's talking about Jew and Gentile, but he's talking about everybody coming into the family.
Yeah.
Everything's changed for you, and so Ephesians 4 becomes a bridge where this is what. So live a life worthy of what's happened. Okay. And part of that is in community. And so he starts off Ephesians 1 talking about God's community is based in unity. And so that was the first piece we talked about on Sunday. Unity is important in these kind of community that we're talking about, especially Apprentice community. But what's beautiful is he's talking about diverse people coming together in unity, and that what unifies them is the one hope that they have in Jesus and the baptism that we have in Jesus, right?
That's
it's
awesome.
the one Lord. It's the one calling.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we talked about Sunday was the necessity for diversity. And I think in our church, Marvin's guilty of it, being homogenous, that we're not very diverse. And not only that, a lot of churches struggle with diversity, but not only that, within our church, we are drawn personally towards people that are in our own age group or walk of life. And so everybody wants to be in a small group. If they have young children, they want to be in a small group with other parents that have young children.
Yeah.
And some of the problem of that playing out is we miss out on the diversity of what God's people brings to a group when we have different walks of life that are together.
Yeah.
So the apprenticeship community is diversity that's brought together in unity. That unity is made in focusing on the one hope we have in Jesus and our baptism into that life. So that's the first one. The second one is in community, Jesus gives gifts. Now, Ephesians 4 has this crazy, complicated quotation of the Old Testament that I didn't nerd out on at Sunday, and I won't do it here.
But you may now?
Maybe, if you want. But what Paul does is he quotes the psalmist, and he actually changes some words from the psalm as he drops it into Ephesians 4. And there's a lot of academic fighting over Did Paul forget what the psalm was? Did he do this on purpose? Is it okay that he did that? Like, did he break something sacred? And what he does is he re-envisions Jesus as this person in the psalmist that climbs Mount Zion in victory. So Jesus becomes the head of the body, the king, the Lord. And when he does that, he gives gifts to the body. And so those gifts that he gives to the body are in the version of people. They're apostles and prophets and teachers and pastors, and I can't remember the other one. But the main point of that is Jesus, when he ascends to be the head, he's still working and helping the body to grow, and he does that by giving gifts of people. Well, in apprenticeship community, you're a gift.
Yeah.
Because
cool.
Joe brings something to we believe that when we get together, it's not just a support group. We actually believe that when we show up together, Jesus has given Joe a gift that will help build up the community into the maturity of Christ. I think that's a powerful, compelling thing.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then the third one, and then I'll shut up for a minute. The third one is this calling to speak truth to one another in love. And that's what led me to do my doctoral work on it, because it's kind of a misunderstood translation in English.
Yeah.
A better way of thinking of it is live truth with one another in love, which means to represent and to live into the truth that we believe about ourselves and who we're called to be. And so when you and I live truth with each other, we actually encourage one another and help build each other up into the maturity that is Christ.
That's awesome.
Yep.
I want to talk more about living truth.
Yes.
Before we do that, I have a couple random questions. One is Ephesians 4. You said this is kind of the basis for the small group thing.
Yes.
Is that something that originated with, is it Charles Wesley?
John Wesley.
John Wesley.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So a couple things that led me to it. The class meeting, the Transformational group, that started with John Wesley kind of stumbled across it.
Okay.
So this group that became one of the most important groups in the movement of Methodism, we wouldn't be here without it.
Right.
He actually accidentally found it. So what he did is he selected leaders that would go around to 10 to 12 people and collect their 1 penny every week for what they were giving to help the poor and to support the local church. And so that became a class, like a group that would oversight. And when that leader did that, he would check in on those people, and he would report back to the pastor, John Wesley, how they're doing and if they're growing in their faith.
Right.
And what they started to realize is, one, it's exhausting to go around to 12 houses. What if we met in one place?
Yeah.
And what if this is more than just like a practical economic function? What if this is a spiritual oversight and a place of growth?
That's
and then throughout his life, and the movement actually looks back at this and goes, man, this is a means of grace. Like Jesus is working in these groups in ways that like it doesn't exist outside of the group.
Yeah.
And so there's something to it. And that's kind of where they came from.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And that kind of relates to my next question. You said, you talked about affinity groups or other kinds of small group kind of things. Yeah. And compared to transformational group, why do you think, at least maybe in this community or most churches, why are small groups like that more prevalent than transformation groups? Do you think there's a reason for that?
Well, affinity groups, there's like, it's a really low barrier of entry. Like there's not much expectation. You just have to like football or basketball or mahjong or whatever. You just have to be a part of that affinity. And so there's not a lot asked of you. Like it's just there and to be there. And again, there's value in that.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
I think there's a way to build relationships in that. Informational groups, I think there's a lot of reasons that we could talk for 45 minutes about how we ended up with a heavy Sunday school place.
Yeah.
Because class meetings in the Methodist Church were before the Sunday schools. But Sunday schools pop up in the Methodist Church in the early 1900s and maybe even before that.
Take off.
Yeah, take off. But part of that informational is there was this, I think, this huge push in learning about Jesus. Like we have to get education and catechism and teaching our people the way of Christianity and what that looks like. And there's a lot of like cultural shifts that make that stay for a really long time. I think the other thing we like about informational groups is it's safer as well. I can just come and listen to the right answers. Excuse me. I don't have to I don't have to bare my soul in a small group like that.
Right.
And so there's a lot of reasons that go about that. And the other thing is I think we are addicted in our lives and my parents' lives, our parents' lives, our grandparents' lives. I think we're addicted in learning like right things. Like knowledge is the thing that sets us free.
Right.
And we can learn a lot of knowledge without ever actually applying it to our life. And so the transformational group is to try and push us down that road a little bit more. Yeah.
That's cool. So that brings us back to living truth in community.
Yeah.
And you said, you kind of spoke to like the necessity of that, or like you said, we each bring some gifting to this group.
Yeah.
So can you speak more about living truth in community and why it's important?
Yeah. So there's so much material we could talk about right now over the last 2 years of craziness in the world.
Yeah.
But think about
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm kind of nervous about what I might accidentally say because I'm like, do I want to say that? Do I want to go down that road?
Save it for next time.
Maybe. But like, okay, so there is. I'll just do this. I'll kind of tiptoe.
Okay.
Around the presidential election, there was a ton of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Like crazy theories, like unbelievably crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of good people that were caught up in these things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of others. I still can't get my head around how easily deceived almost all of us, myself included, were by different things through the last political cycle. Right. Believing certain things and so add the subtleness of like postmodern technology-filled America. Mm-hmm. America would tell the 8 months pregnant mom that has 4 kids that she needs to be able to cook and provide and read a book on Aristotle and do all of these things and look good on Instagram because that's what she sees all the time. Right. And so when she actually can't achieve that, it's actually her fault when the world is actually putting before her a utopia that's just false and no one's actually living it. Yeah. So you put all of these falsehoods around us, and you start adding what's on our phone and the constant scroll and the way that we're being discipled by technology. I start adding all these things in, and there's nobody that's living truth in front of us. And so we actually can't discern truthfulness. And so in other places, Paul... Maybe Philippians 2 for sure talks about having the mind of Christ. Mm-hmm. I think the only way we can have the mind of Christ is being in a community that helps us to focus on the mind of Christ and to live out that truth and discern it. Right. And so my original example of conspiracy theory, I had someone in my accountability group who's not here, but in a previous place, a small group, that was like way out there in that stuff. And being able to come in a community and go, I don't think this is right. Yeah. And I think this is how we live truth. Right. Now, those are big examples, but also I need to see you. You may disagree with this, but like I've told Lauren, like Joe has so much patience and you have like 9 kids now. How many kids?
Not quite, 5.
Okay, 5. So but let's just say, even if you don't agree with this, hypothetically, I see the way that Joe is being a patient dad with a lot of kids.
Thanks.
And then I'm around my 2, and I feel like I want to run through a wall. How do I be loving right now how do I be what I'm called to be right now? And so those are other small ways of living truth. What does it look like for me to live out the truth of the gospel in my life? And how can I be in a community where I'm actually being shaped and formed by others living out that very truth?
That's cool.
Make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. Even just like the proximity to being close to people like that is encouraging. Yeah. Like in that setting too. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the company you keep, right? It's the phrase we've all heard. Yeah. But what if there's actually some like spiritual giftings that's given by us being in a place that others are living out truth? Like what if my life is changed from the inside out because I surround myself with people that point me to Christ in every facet of life? So living the truth with one another now becomes something that's extremely compelling for me. And then anecdotally, when I've seen this happen, because I've started 20 groups like
Yeah.
this now, and we're about to launch 3 or 4 more in the next few weeks, I've seen it happen. It's incredible. People just spurring on one another to
Right.
do good works, to live out their faith.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So where do you see this taking our congregation in our church?
Yeah. So one of the things I've often prayed about when I've worked in this, I've done a lot of work studying and pouring into this and training leaders, but I've tried, because I'm kind of a control freak, and I kind of want to like be a part of everything. I've tried really hard to say, God, you've got to move this. And so my prayer is that if God wants to move this through the church, then he would do that. I don't want to make this be the thing that everyone needs to take, though I believe in it. It's changed my life. And so my prayer is that if God wants this to be a culture change in our church, that he would make that happen. And I'll do everything I can to partner in that work. So we've started by just training some leaders, helping to equip them to start groups. We're going to start with 4 groups that are about to begin. I'm recruiting another class of leaders to train them this spring. And we're just going to repeat that process and pray over these groups and support them and let them take off.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Really excited about it.
I think just hearing you talk, I think my prayer is that it's, and I think this is very much your heart, that it's more than a program.
Yeah.
Or just another thing that we're offering to our congregation.
Yeah.
But when you think about the way that something like this has the capacity to change people's lives and their walk with God and their future and their families, I think the implications are really big.
Yeah, I'm
excited about it.
I do too, man. If anecdotally I've seen people's marriages be restored in this, because finally husband and wife are in community together and they've never had it in church before.
Yeah.
Women's group, men's group.
Right.
But now I get to hear what the way the Lord has shown up in my wife's life, and it gives a place where that can testify to that. I've seen people learn to pray, even in my last group that's here, training leaders, a leader like learning to pray for the first time.
Yeah.
So like if these things are happening, what we're actually doing is providing a location for people to go on the way of following Jesus and be an apprentice. And that's our hope.
That's awesome.
And if that is happening, then I know the Lord wants to be about that. And so we should too. So we're going to pray into it and run after it.
Sweet. Well, before we close, we're coming up on week 3 this Sunday.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a little glimpse into this
so
Sunday?
You got a little bit with the history of the class meeting. I'm going to start to introduce the class meeting this week. I joked last time we talked 2 most boring things together, class and meeting.
Yeah.
It's not very marketable, so I want to introduce the class meeting and what it means. A little teaser is this is about 10 to 12 men and women coming together to not study a book of the Bible, to not have a curriculum in front of them, but to come together to testify to what Christ is doing in their life right now. And so every week we answer a question that's like this or this question: how is it with your soul? Or how is your life in God? How is God working in your life right now? And the groups are built on that. So I'm going to introduce some of the history, and then I'm going to kind of like introduce what it looks like for Marvin.
Sweet.
So that's this coming week. And then the last week I've got friends coming in that have been on this journey and have come through hardship and have incredible faith. And it is all God's glory, but a lot of it happened in location of these communities, and you're going to get to hear from them in a couple weeks.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, as we close, I wanted to say thank you for all the work you've poured into this.
Yeah.
I know this isn't something that you just stumbled upon and thought, hey, it'd be cool to do.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to talk about this on Sunday, but I know this is a big part of your life.
Yeah.
Some of the doctoral work that you're doing.
Yes.
So thank you for all the work you poured into this.
Yeah.
And to Marvin United Methodist Church, we hope to see you guys Sunday in core, and we're looking forward to this Sunday and being together. So thanks for tuning in. You guys have a great rest of your week.
Yeah. Love y'all. See you later. Thanks, Joe.